Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're breaking down the Monday Night Football Showdown Slate, the Las Vegas Raiders versus the New Orleans Saints. And this should be a pretty exciting game for fantasy purposes, especially in season long, because there's quite a few relevant fantasy options, including 2 first-round picks in Josh Jacobs and Alvin Kamara. Unfortunately, no Michael Thomas, but you got Drew Brees in there, you got Darren Waller, you got Jared Cook, you got Emmanuel Sanders, and Henry Ruggs potentially. So should be a pretty exciting game for season long and for DFS purposes as well. So I am looking forward to it. And personally, I need Josh Jacobs to have a decent game to keep me in the lead in my season long matchup. So hope you guys all do well in that. But anyway, before we continue, as always, if you guys could leave a like. If you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button, and we're all season long trying to help you guys become better NFL DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. If you don't follow me on social media, my handle's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you want to support my content over on Patreon, always much appreciated. We got 300 plus members there. You can hop into the Discord chat, ask me questions, and you get access to my entire NFL DFS data sheet as well, which is pretty much everything you need on there. The matchup info, the Vegas totals, the pace of play, all the statistics you want, the matchups, and all that fun stuff. It's all listed on there. Everything's color-coded nice and neat so you can easily digest the information. And I also have cheat sheets as well. So if you're interested, links down below. If not, that's fine. Let's just dive into tonight's slate. So we'll start with quarterback here, and the obvious option is one of the best flex options on the entire slate is Drew Brees at 10,600. He is a bit pricey. He didn't do that great in week 1, but we have a 27 implied team total here for the New Orleans Saints and a 48.5 point over-under. So points are going to be scored. Now, obviously, it hurts that Drew Brees does not have Michael Thomas throw the ball to, which is obviously he's one of the best wide receivers in all the NFL. So it's going to hurt a little bit, but he should still be fine here. And Vegas doesn't really have too many concerns with the 27 implied team total. Now, if you're looking at how he did in week 1, it wasn't all that great. He was not throwing the ball down the field at all, only 5.3 yards per attempt. Only 160 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Didn't throw a pick, but that YPA was very, very, very low. But he's still a fine option here. He's still got good options in Traquan Smith, Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook, and Alvin Kamara. So I don't really think Drew Brees should miss too much of a beat here. This is a very good matchup versus the Raiders, as they're 30th DVOA versus the pass, 22 Draftkings points per game to quarterbacks, nearly 275 passing yards per game, and over 2 passing touchdowns as well. And the Saints also have a pretty big pass blocking advantage over on PFF as well this week. So Drew Brees, he's a bit pricey. I don't think you have to plug him into your captain spot, but he's an excellent flex option, as most quarterbacks are on showdown slates. Now, Derek Carr, 9,200. I don't love the matchup here versus the Saints. They got a pretty stingy defense, and they only have a 21.5 implied team total. But I still think he's an okay option given the price tag. And if you are just looking at the Vegas spread, they should be playing from behind here, so they're probably going to throw the ball a little bit more than they'd like to. I know their game plan's just to try to get Josh Jacobs as many touches as they can on the ground. But if they're trailing, they're not going to be able to do that as much as they're going to want to. So they might be forced to throw the ball a little bit more. But Derek Carr, 9,200, he's fine on a showdown slate. I know the matchup isn't great if you're looking at how these Saints were versus the pass last season. They were 13th DVOA versus the pass, allowed less than 20 Draftkings points per game to quarterbacks, 260 passing yards, and 1.63 touchdowns per game. Also a negative pass blocking matchup advantage here for the Las Vegas Raiders, according to PFF as well. So I don't love the matchup, but it's also going to be a downgrade if Henry Ruggs can't go as well. But given the price tag, he is flex eligible over on DraftKings. Well, obviously he's eligible for the flex, but flex viable, I should say. It's just, I don't love the matchup. I don't think we're going to see a big ceiling game from Derek Carr, but he should be okay given the price tag, and it's a showdown slate. Then Taysom Hill, 2,200. He's more of just a troll play for the most part, because Taysom Hill is a guy that infuriates me for fantasy purposes, because every time I roster Alvin Kamara or Michael Thomas, I swear it's Taysom Hill stealing all the points. He'll get the goal line work for some reason. I don't know why, but he'll randomly be in there in the goal line. He'll get a receiving touchdown near the goal line. It just doesn't make sense. Or he'll throw a passing touchdown when I roster Drew Brees. He always seems to steal my fantasy points. Now, it's hard to project the guy for a good game, but he can do a little bit of everything. He can run the ball a little bit, he can throw the ball a little bit, and he can catch the ball a little bit. If you're looking at what he did in week 1, he had 38 passing yards on 1 passing attempt, and he had 2 rushing attempts for 13 rushing yards. Nothing too crazy, but the guy's capable of putting up a few points here and there. He's only 2,200, so if he squeaks his way into the end zone, he'll be fine at that price tag, but he's a guy that can be very risky, but he's a jack of all trades, and On a random showdown slate, it seems to be a place where Taysom Hill could shine and break a slate randomly, so I think he's viable in tournaments, but not someone you're going to want to put in your main lineup for the most part. And with that being said, I think we can move on to the running backs at this point. And my favorite play on the slate is going to be Alvin Kamara here at 11,400. I know he's super expensive, but with Michael Thomas missing this game, Alvin Kamara is probably going to be the main pass catching option here for Drew Brees. And it was kind of weird to say for a running back, but Kamara is an excellent wide receiver, and even when he can't get it working on the ground like we saw last week versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I mean, the guy had 1.3 yards per carry, which is horrendous. He had 12 rushing attempts and 16 rushing yards, which sucks. He did find the end zone once, and he's got a knack for finding the end zone. The guy can't score a lot of touchdowns. He's good on the goal line. But the thing we like about Kamara the most is he's a good receiver. He had 7 targets last week, had 5 catches, 51 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown as well. He also had a pretty high 27% target share and a 44% weighted opportunity share. And with Michael Thomas being out, those numbers should probably only go up, and it would not surprise me if Kamara goes past double-digit targets. And by that, I don't mean triple-digit targets, but I mean like past 10 targets. I think we can see anywhere from 8 to 12 targets from Kamara here. And I know last season we saw games where he'd have like 15 targets. And I remember one game, I think it was either a couple years ago or it was last year, he had 20 targets in the game. Not projecting him for 20 targets, but he should get close to double-digit targets here, and he's an excellent pass catcher. Now, he's not going to get all the work on the ground. We saw Latavius Murray steal 15 rushing attempts last week, so he's kind of the bruiser in between the tackles, while Alvin Kamara is the guy that can get the ball in open space and do his magic. He's a very versatile back. He's great in open space. He's very elusive. I mean, every single year, he's one of the most elusive backs according to PFF. Now, last year, he was injured for a little bit, which kind of hampered him in that category, but he's fully healthy now, and he's just one of my favorite running backs to watch, and he should have a very strong game here. It's a very good matchup on the ground versus the Raiders. They were 29 DVOA versus the run last season, 25 Draftkings points per game given up, 80 rushing yards per game, 0.7 rushing touchdowns per game. And versus running backs in the passing game, they allowed 5.5 receptions per game and 50 receiving yards per game as well. And according to PFF, the Saints have a huge run blocking advantage matchup here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. So Kamara, super expensive, but he is my favorite play on the entire slate. And I'm going to make them the thumbnail of this video as well. Now, Josh Jacobs, 9,600. I'm a huge Josh Jacobs fan. I think he is an excellent running back. He's super talented. And he graded out very well on a lot of PFF metrics last year. And in week 1, he actually had the most forced missed tackles as well. So once again, he's looking like he's going to be pretty awesome this season. And the thing I like the most from Josh Jacobs last week, yeah, he scored 3 touchdowns and was good on the ground. But he was involved in the passing game, which was not something we could say last season. He just really didn't get many targets, pretty much like 2 targets per game. But they're finally getting rid of the ball in the passing game, which I said they were going to in the offseason, and they did week 1. He had 5 targets for 46 receiving yards and 4 catches. He also had a 21% target share and a 39% weighted opportunity share. So that was really nice to see from Josh Jacobs, and he's not going to get like Alvin Kamara-like numbers in the passing game, but if you can get us 20 touches on the ground and like a handful of targets, that's going to be excellent numbers usually each and every single week. Now, this matchup versus the Saints is not something that's going to get me too excited. They are pretty stingy versus the run. They were 11th DVA versus that last season, only 20.3 DraftKings points per game to running backs and 0.44 rushing touchdowns per game as well. Now, versus the pass to running backs, they did allow 6 receptions per game and 40 receiving yards. But Josh Jacobs, if you can lock in a bell cow running back on a showdown slate, you're pretty much going to do it each and every single time, even though the matchup is not great. And they're only 5.5 point dogs. It's not like they're double-digit dogs here, so I don't think this game is going to get too out of hand where they have to throw the ball each and every single play. So Josh Jacobs should be fine. And even if they are trailing, I mean, guys like Jalen Richard and Devontae Booker will probably get maybe a little bit more run, but Josh Jacobs should still be involved in the passing game. And I feel like you just kind of lock in Alvin Kamara and Josh Jacobs because the rest of these running backs on the slate, Latavius Murray, I'll talk about in a little bit. I think he's fine given the price tag, but you really can't count on Booker or Richard. These guys just didn't really play last week. And Michael Burton, Ty Montgomery, you're not playing these guys at all. So, I mean, just locking in the 2 stud running backs because the receivers, it's kind of a mixed bag as well with Michael Thomas being out. So, Jacobs, Kamara, pretty much the 2 best plays on the slate, and you can lock them in for heavy workloads. So, definitely like Josh Jacobs, even though the matchup is not fantastic. Now, Latavius Murray at 3,400, I think he's actually a pretty solid option here. He actually outrushed Alvin Kamara last week in terms of yardage and rushing attempts. Had 15 rushing attempts last week for 48 rushing yards. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be involved in the passing game, so you're kind of just hoping he gets a goal line touchdown. But I think it's viable at that price tag. It's also a revenge game for Latavius Murray. I'm not really sure if he cares too much about being traded by the Raiders because I'm sure he likes being on the Saints, which is a much better team. But still playing his old team, so I'm sure he's going to want to show out a little bit. And that's a good price point. And I mean, the running back salaries just fall off a cliff after Kamara and Josh Jacobs. We go from 11,400 to 9,600 all the way down to 3,400. So I think we're getting some decent value here on Latavius Murray. And he should be able to get us double-digit touches here, which I'll take it the price tag. It's a very soft matchup versus the Raiders, so I think he is certainly interesting there. Then Devontae Booker and Jalen Richard. If you think the Raiders are going to be trailing in this game, they'll probably get a little bit more work than they did last week because the Raiders had a pretty strong hold in that game last week. They weren't really trailing, and they were pretty much just running it with Josh Jacobs to keep the lead. So I'm not sure what the game's just going to look like totally if they are trailing in this game, but I'd imagine they get a little bit more work, but it's not going to be really too much for me to consider them as very good plays on this slate. You can take a couple dart throws at guys like Booker or Jalen Richard, but overall, I can't really trust them too much if you're looking at what they did in week 1. Booker had 3 targets for 23 receiving yards, and they had 4 rushing attempts for 29 rushing yards. It wasn't awful, and Jalen Richard had 1 target for 15 receiving yards. So if I was going to pick anyone, I would say Booker, but even then, you're kind of just, I don't know, it's just, they don't really impress me too much. So we'll move on to the wide receivers because we're not playing any of these guys down low. And then we can just skip Michael Thomas here. He's 10,200. He's not going to be playing in this game, so you do not play Michael Thomas. So going down to Emmanuel Sanders here at 8,800. He's going to be the guy that's most likely to receive the most targets now with Michael Thomas being out. Now, and I mean most targets in the wide receiver position. It would not surprise me if Jared Cook or Alvin Kamara see the most targets in this game. But as for wide receivers go, he should see the heaviest workload here. If you're looking at what he did in week 1, it wasn't really that impressive. He had a 17% target share. 5 targets for 3 catches and only 15 yards. He did find the end zone, but overall, nothing too impressive here. An 8 out of only 4.8, 24 air yards, and like I already went over, a 17% target share. So it wasn't anything too impressive here, but with Michael Thomas being out, we'll probably see anywhere from like 6 to 10 targets for Emmanuel Sanders, and this is a pretty soft matchup through the air versus the Raiders. If you're looking at their splits last season, they were 38th DVA versus the pass, 36 Draftkings points per game to wide receivers, over a touchdown per game to wide receivers, and about 170 receiving yards per game as well. So Emmanuel Sanders, he's pretty expensive, and I'd prefer spending up for the running backs over Sanders, so I'm not sure if you're able to fit him in as well. But he's fine. Just don't think he's an absolute must here. And I think if you want to get leverage, you could go with Traquan Smith. I actually think there's maybe a little bit more upside with when you factor in the price and everything for Traquan Smith. But we'll go down to Henry Ruggs here at 6,800. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting because we have no idea if he's going to play in this game. He did not practice on Thursday or Friday. He went through the walkthrough on Saturday, which is kind of hard to gauge if that means he's going to play or not. I guess he's trending in the right direction, given that he actually was a participant in it. But even if he does play, I'm probably going to be out on Henry Ruggs because he's dealing with an injury and he's going to see a lot of Marshawn Lattimore, more than likely. I'm not sure if it's going to be a full shadow, but he's going to be the guy that's going to see Lattimore the most. So even then, it's kind of like, do you really want to play Henry Ruggs facing Lattimore? I mean, the guy's a rookie. Yeah, he's going to be talented wide receiver. He was a first-round pick for a reason, but I don't know. I just don't love it versus Lattimore. Now, if you're looking at what he did in week 1, it wasn't too bad. He had 5 targets, 3 catches for 55 receiving yards. He had an 8 out of 18.6. Was getting the ball down the field, 17% target share, 64% weighted opportunity share, and over 50% market share of the team's air yards. But again, I'm probably going to be out on him versus Marshawn Lattimore if he's good to go. If he's out, you can bump up guys like Hunter Renfrow, Nelson Aguilar, and Bryan Edwards. If Henry Ruggs happens to be out, Hunter Renfrow would be my favorite wide receiver on the Raiders. And then it's kind of a toss-up between Nelson Aguilar and Bryan Edwards, which I'll talk about them in a little bit. But I would make Hunter Renfrow my favorite play wide receiver-wise for the Raiders. But Traquan Smith at 6,400. So he had 1 target last week. And keep in mind, Michael Thomas did not get hurt until the very end of this game. So he pretty much played the entire game. So don't think that Michael Thomas went out and Traquan Smith just still didn't get any looks. He only had 1 target, but I would imagine these numbers are going to go up, and he's certainly got the upside. He can burn a defense deep. So he's not as safe as Emmanuel Sanders, but I like the upside here. And on a Showdown Slate, you're kind of looking for upside to take down tournaments. Sanders is the safe play. Traquan, he's kind of the guy that can go big or go home. But yeah, I don't mind him. I mean, he had success last year. There was some games where he did well. But this is a very beatable matchup versus the Las Vegas Raiders. I keep wanting to say Oakland Raiders. It's so hard when teams change their names or change locations to get the right name down. You've been calling him a different name for quite some time. But Traquan Smith, the matchup's good. I think he's fine with Michael Thomas being out. Hunter Renfrow at 5,800, he'd be my favorite receiver on the Raiders if Henry Ruggs happens to be out. But even if Henry Ruggs isn't, I guess I would still say Hunter Renfrow is probably my favorite play, given that he should avoid Lattimore for the most part. But if you're looking at what he did in week 1, he only saw 2 targets. He caught both of them for 21 receiving yards, but nothing too impressive. And this is not a great matchup versus the Saints, but we'll just have to monitor the Henry Ruggs news because I really can't go too in-depth on these guys until we know if he's going to be in or out. Aguilar happened to catch a touchdown last week on his lone target for 23 yards, but I mean the volume's just wasn't really there. But keep in mind they did have the game kind of in control and they were just using Josh Jacobs for the most part. But even then, it's gonna be hard to trust these guys. Bryan Edwards, he had 1 target, 17 yards. Like nothing you can really put too much stock in. And Deontay Harris, he also saw a target for 17 yards, and he's not on the Raiders, he's on the Saints. And with Michael Thomas being out, maybe he sees like 2 or 3 targets, but even then, you can't really count on Deontay Harris for the most part. So these guys are all fine. I don't love the wide receivers on this slate. They're kind of all a little iffy, so that's why I'm going to prioritize probably Drew Brees, Josh Jacobs, and Alvin Kamara over these wide receivers. So you're kind of just throwing in whoever fits at the end. I'll say it's a pretty weak wide receiver slate, but these guys are okay. But I like the tight ends better than I like the wide receivers for the most part, which we'll talk about now because I'm not going to have any interest in guys like Zay Jones, Callaway, Gafford, or Williams. So I'll move on to the tight end spot, which we got 2 really good plays in Jared Cook and Darren Waller. And I actually like both these guys pretty much over all of the wide receivers we talked about. But Jared Cook in week 1, he was pretty good. He had a 65% weighted opportunity share, a 41% market share of the team's air yards, 8 out of 9.4, and 24% target share. And he had 6 targets, 5 catches, and 80 receiving yards. And this is a pretty soft matchup versus the Raiders. And like Latavius Murray, he's also a former Raider. So I'm not sure if he really cares too much about being traded away from the Raiders. But it is a revenge narrative if you guys are into that. And look, it's a soft matchup versus the Raiders. Allowed over 13 Draftkings points per game to tight ends last season. About a half a touchdown per game and over 50 receiving yards. And Jared Cook, he's got Drew Brees throwing the ball. You got no Michael Thomas. So it would not surprise me if he saw close to double-digit targets here. So like Jared Cook quite a bit and pretty much like him over any single wide receiver that I talked about. Then Darren Waller the same way. He's my favorite receiving option on the Raiders. I like him over any of the wide receivers, even if Henry Ruggs happens to play. I feel the most confident in him, and I feel the safest with him as well. He had 28% target share in week 1, and a really low 8 out of 3.8, but 7 targets, 6 catches for 45 receiving yards. A tough matchup here versus the Saints, but he would be my favorite receiving option on the Las Vegas Raiders if you guys are trying to target a couple of those guys. And then after those 2 guys, it just falls off a cliff. You got Dusty Jason Witten here, and then you have Josh Hill, who's always good for maybe a random touchdown here or there, but can't really trust Josh Hill for the most part. But if you need a pump play at 800, he's got the potential for catching a goal line touchdown, but that's just about it. But if you want to fit in guys like Drew Brees, Kamara, Jared Cook, Darren Waller, and Josh Jacobs, you're probably going to have to pick a pump play, and Josh Hill, I guess, would be my favorite at 800, but you could also go with Jason Witten here at 1,000. I mean, he saw a target last week. He had a catch for 2 yards. It wasn't anything spectacular, and it would not surprise me if he puts the same exact stat line up once again, but $1,000, he's got random touchdown upside, and that's really the nicest thing I can say for Jason Witten. But yeah, the top 2 tight ends here are by far, I mean, just way better than Jason Witten and Josh Hill. And I like them quite a bit over the wide receivers as well. I think they're pretty safe. Then moving on to the defenses, I don't want to play the Raiders for the most part. They are pretty cheap, but don't really want to play the Raiders versus the Saints offense. If I was going to play a defense, I would obviously prefer the Saints here. They're pretty tough versus the run. They're pretty tough versus the pass. Derek Carr, I wouldn't say is a world beater. And especially if Henry Ruggs is out, this is going to take another offensive weapon away from Derek Carr. So the Saints defense, I'd say they're a pretty strong play. I do like Josh Jacobs and Darren Waller, but I wouldn't fault you for playing the Saints defense. They're a little pricey though, 5,200, but 5.5 point favorites here, and the Raiders only have a 21.5 implied team total at home. Then as for the kickers, you can't really project kickers for the most part. You kind of just take the guy that's got the higher team total, which would be Will Lutz. He's also a pretty good kicker, but kickers are just whatever. If you need like $4,000 at the end of your lineup, you can throw in a guy like Carlson, or you can throw in a guy like Lutz. Doesn't matter. If you had to pick one, I'm going to prefer Lutz here. He's actually a good kicker. He's on a good offense, and I think he's totally fine. But kickers are what they are. You can they're boring plays that can get you like 5 to 10 points for the most part. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate that. And that's pretty much going to be it. I'll have my first look video out probably on Tuesday, and then we'll go from there. So appreciate you guys watching, and I am going to go to bed because, as you can see, I am super tired.